Well, good evening, everyone. My name, well, I think most of you know me, but anyway, my name, for those of you who don't know me, is Mario Relich, and I chair the Writers for Peace Committee of Scottish Pen. Tonight's session is by the Writers for Peace Committee and Dovetails, chaired by Jean Rafferty. Jean and I are co-chairing the session. The title of the session is The Age of Impunity, because it will deal with some of the main sources of instability in the world today, and the reckless impunity which some of the world's leaders threaten global peace. One recent example was a devastating shopping center attack on civilians, which occurred in a Ukraine town yesterday. David Miliband, and I don't mean Ed Miliband, I mean David Miliband, chief executive of the International Rescue Committee, used this very phrase, the age of impunity, in an interview with Channel 4 News last night. The first speaker will be the human rights professional and activist Alexis Krikorian. Yeah. Other participants with their own observations and poetry readings will be from the Scottish literary scene. Over to you, Jean.
Hi, thank you very much, Mario. I'm delighted to be here having a joint event with Scottish Pen. I think that we all have been absolutely devastated by what's happened in Ukraine and other places previously, which haven't had as much coverage. So I'm going to introduce Alexis Krikorian. I met Alexis through Scottish Pen at a Pen conference, actually. And he runs a charity which campaigns for Armenians. Alexis has written a really powerful book, which is called Toxic Neutrality. And I think we have seen various forms of that going on in the world at the moment. I'd like him to explain it. Alexis, can you explain what that term means and how you came to choose it?
Well, thank you, Jean. Thank you, Dovetails and Scottish Pen, for having me tonight. I'm delighted to be here with you all. The term toxic neutrality, for the time being, belongs mostly to the gaming world, where it refers to those players who actively choose neutrality in a battle between good and evil. And I think it would be a pity if it remained confined to the virtual world, as it has real impacts, real consequences in the real world in terms of perpetuating human rights violations and persecution. The term came to me, as you said, some wars are less covered than others. And the term came to me during the Second Karabakh War in September, October, and November 2020, when I witnessed the non-reaction of the international community by that I mean mostly Western powers and Russia, to this war initiated on the 27th of September by Azerbaijan, with the full support of Turkey, Turkish generals, the famous or infamous, depending, Bayraktar drones, even Turkish special forces, and Syrian mercenaries. Unleashed a very strong war on Armenians at that moment. And as I said, the Western powers and Russia were neutral. I'll just give one example. Then US State Secretary Mike Pompeo talked about Karabakh, Artsakh by its Armenian name, region, as a piece of real estate. So I think in Trumpian terms, it meant that the highest bidder could grab it, really. Also in the media, it was not reported at all. It went completely under the radar, or when it was
we didn't read about it at all in the UK. I don't remember seeing a single article.
Yeah, no, it's or when it was reported, and I think that Armenia actually lost the war on the ground, but also the information war, because when it was reported, I think it was ill-reported with the use of terms by some media or the press agencies like AFP, Reuters, of Azerbaijani-sponsored terms like Armenian separatists to refer to the local indigenous Armenian population.
It's a loaded term, isn't it? It's very loaded.
Yeah, separatist. At least a much, frankly, I think a more neutral term for the media to use would have been at least independentists. You know, people seeking independence. So less loaded than separatists, really.
Yeah,
Which
yeah.
But of course, it's an age-old reality. You know, I spotted a quote by Desmond Tutu who said, and I'm going to read it. If an elephant has its foot on the tail of a mouse, and you say that you are neutral, the mouse will not appreciate your neutrality. Well, in that case, Armenia and Karabakh, in a demographic ratio of 1 to 30 to Turkey and Azerbaijan, 3 million people on one side, 90 million people on the other side. They are the mouse, and Turkey and Azerbaijan are the elephant, really. And during this war, all civilians, Armenian civilians, had to leave, and 4,000 Armenian soldiers were killed. Most of them were young men between the age of 18 and 22. And just to give an example, it is as if in a 44-day war, the United Kingdom had lost 90,000 soldiers, especially young men between 18 and 22, facing armies from a bloc of countries of 2 billion people in relation to the size of the United Kingdom. That's almost China and India put together. So yes, the imbalance of power there was really, really crazy. So just, yeah, toxic neutrality is, in a nutshell, is a false, morally wrong, I believe, equivalence between the aggressor and the aggrieved, which in fact is an endorsement that doesn't say its name of the aggressor, which is seen as a positive agent of, in a way, of international law. And it can only reinforce the impunity that's tonight's subject in that case of Baku and Ankara. Yeah.
I think, you know, we've talked about this, Alexis, that had the international community taken more notice of what happened in Karabakh, maybe Ukraine would not have happened. Maybe Putin would not have felt that he had impunity to go in there.
Yeah, no, I agree. To support Ukraine in 2022 is to support a democracy with its flaws, but a democracy being attacked by an imperialist autocrat with its many more flaws. And I think that in 2020, yes, the West, I said Russia earlier, but in that case, let's focus on the West, accepted that war of aggression against the Armenians, against Armenian democracy, because in the local context, Armenia, with its flaws, is a democracy attacked by what I can best describe as imperialist autocracies with their many more flaws. And yes, I'm sure that somehow emboldened Putin to invade Ukraine in 22 to see that there was absolutely no reaction to that war of invasion in 2020. And an NGO called Freedom House, in its report Nations in Transit 22, said that, and I will actually read what they wrote in that report. Aliyev's evident success in using military aggression to reinforce his rule may have contributed to Vladimir Putin's decision to invade Ukraine in February 2022. And it's extremely worrying because, of course, tomorrow everyone thinks that it could be also Taiwan's turn.
Yeah. Well, many other places, I think, must be worried. And we'll talk to Donald a wee bit later about that. In the situation in Ukraine has become a kind of proxy war, hasn't it? We're talking about neutrality and how the West hasn't done enough, you know, to the international community hasn't done enough to object to these acts of aggression. But when you apply that to Ukraine, we've only got the appearance of neutrality. We say we're not taking part in a war, and then we send billions of pounds worth of weapons to the country.
Yeah, I think, yes, sorry.
Yeah, it's like a proxy war between the West and Russia on our side.
Yeah, I think on both sides, the West is fighting a proxy war in the Ukraine. I think you mentioned figures, but as early, for instance, as the 27th of February, so 3 days after the invasion of Ukraine, Borrell, the equivalent of the EU foreign minister, wrote an article in The Guardian saying that the EU would provide weapons for Ukraine's armed forces, saying it's a matter of life and death. And of course, I think the expression was a bit funny, because any war is a matter of life and death. President Biden, you mentioned figures, signed a $40 billion Ukraine assistance bill in May. And also, I noted another example. Foreign Secretary Liz Truss declared that she absolutely supports British citizens who want to volunteer to fight in defense of the Ukraine. But conversely, and to some extent, I think it's also a proxy war for Putin, to a proxy war, with NATO and the United States. For Russia, certainly, its great power status is at stake. But also, what we noticed lately is that US ambitions have escalated from supporting Ukraine defend itself to weakening Russia so much that it cannot do another such invasion in future. And on the 19th of June, so less than 10 days ago, the NATO Secretary General Stoltenberg said that this war could last for years. And so the prospect, of course, of a settlement seems further away than ever. And we've seen, as Mario mentioned, yesterday's horrific bombing of a shopping mall, a signal that Putin is not ready to compromise. But nevertheless, I think a question we should be asking ourselves as representative of as NGOs is shouldn't there be a settlement with compromise instead of a war that could last for years? And all the suffering that goes with it. I remember during the 44-day war, I could tell you that all the Armenians were every minute, every hour, and every day of that 44-day war we're hoping, we're praying for a ceasefire to happen. Now the question is, of course, at what cost? And the subject tonight is impunity. And of course, I absolutely think there should be no compromise on impunity. I mean, Russia started the war. There are war crimes. There are crimes against humanity, and those who are responsible for these crimes should be tried for the sake of justice, for the sake of the victims.
It's highly unlikely that will happen, isn't it? I mean, one of the things that all of these wars have in common is that they're about money and they're about provision of energy. And in the West, we've said, oh, we're going to cut off Russian gas. But in fact, that's not going to happen till the end of the year. And I suspect that the leaders are hoping that the war will be over. But if they keep on supplying weapons, they won't, will they? It's all to do with energy. And that is a great part of what happened in Karabakh,
Yeah, as well, as the houses were burning, as people were fleeing their homes, as young men, soldiers, were being killed by Bayraktar drones. The TAP, the Trans-Adriatic Pipeline, the last leg, the European leg of the 40 billion euro Southern European gas corridor project, labeled one of Europe's most strategic projects, actually started delivering gas to Europe from the Caspian Sea in Azerbaijan. We're talking the day after the ceasefire in November 2020. And as you said, it shows that energy, the supply of energy and the security of energy supply and wars are very much linked, and that there are a lot of connections between politicians, high-level politicians, and energy circles. Just to name a few, Tony Blair, for instance, was hired as a lobbyist for the Trans-Adriatic pipeline in 2014.
Here's a few of them. Are you?
Oh, this is a picture from 2006, the inauguration of another pipeline, the BTC oil pipeline from Azerbaijan to Turkey. And there you have, it's 2006, but you have the CEO of BP, John Brown. Aliyev and Erdogan were already in power, and the two others are no longer in power. And you see the pipeline, but you also see on this day of the inauguration of the pipeline that if you look closely, Armenia is the smallest country on this map, and you see that the south of Armenia has disappeared, and instead you see that there is a link, direct land connection between Azerbaijan and Turkey. I believe that this was one of the war goals of Azerbaijan in Turkey in the fall of 2020 to realize, to make that land connection between their two countries happen. This is an old pan-Turkic dream to have such a land connection, opening Turkey to the Caspian Sea and to the vast-speaking Turkish world, Turkish-speaking world. And of course, there is a strong connection between BP and Azerbaijan, and this goes back to 1992 when former Prime Minister Margaret Thatcher delivered in person a $30 million check on behalf of BP to the Azerbaijani government. So this is but of course it is also true in other contexts, and Ukraine and Russia. Gerhard Schröder, the former German chancellor, is still on the supervisory board of Gazprom, for instance. But he's been heavily criticized in Germany, and the German prosecutor initiated a procedure for crimes against humanity against Gerhard Schröder, actually in March 22. We will see where that goes, but it's a good sign, I think, for.
Yeah, we can't. I think we can't be too hopeful, can we? Given that Putin has walked away from Crimea and Georgia and Azerbaijan after having attacked Armenia, were then rewarded financially.
Who? Sorry.
Azerbaijan, having attacked Armenia, were then rewarded financially by America.
Yes, by well, you know, I mean, as the war in Ukraine was looming, I mean, in February 22, Stoltenberg, the NATO Secretary General, publicly thanked Azerbaijan for being a reliable energy supplier to Europe. And also, for instance, on the day that Italian Prime Minister Mario Draghi spoke with President Aliyev to deepen the energy cooperation between Italy and Azerbaijan, Azerbaijan cuts the gas supply to Karabakh, and it's 120,000 people, as a cold snap was happening. And there was a humanitarian crisis, not reported at all in international press, that the entire civilian population of Karabakh was cut off from gas, and we're talking homes, schools, hospitals, yes, after the war, Europe was going to give in investments to Armenia 2.6 billion euros and 150 million euros to Azerbaijan. But this was changed because Azerbaijan complained, and 3 months later, an EU commissioner went to Baku and announced that the EU would invest at least 2 billion 2 billion euros in Azerbaijan as well. So even that, which could have been seen as a very light form of punishment for initiating a war, was not happen. And yeah, so it's the rewards for Azerbaijan. I mean, right now, Azerbaijan has a lot of leverage on the West, as the West is trying to cut off Russian gas. But what people don't know, and maybe I'd like to stress that, is that 20% of Azerbaijani gas, for instance, is owned by Lukoil, Russia's energy giant. The deal was made also, interestingly, 3 weeks before the start of the invasion of Ukraine, which means that every time Britain or EU buy 5 euros or 5 pounds of Azerbaijani gas, one euro goes to Russia and potentially fund Russia's war effort. Yes. But of course, we don't talk about this.
No. Well, thank you very much. That's been so interesting. And what I'm going to do is Alexis made some notes for this meeting, and I'm going to paste them into the chat because so that people can study it later. You know, I think we know very little about this war, but it's made a pattern for what's happening in Ukraine. And perhaps I think, Mario, we're going to hear a bit more about another country which is being affected by the war now. I'll hand over to you, Mario.
Right. So, oh yes, I'm interviewing Donald. Donald? Ah, there you are.
Hello, Mario. Hi.
Well, Donald will be reading some of his poems later, so I'll give a fuller introduction then. But for the moment, what you need to know is that Donald is a Scottish poet who lives with his family in Finland. So I just briefly look at what's going on in Finland. So I've got a few questions here. Well, my first question is, are memories of Russia's war in Finland just before World War II relevant to the situation with Finland and Russia now? Because during, I think just before World War II, Russia invaded Finland, didn't it?
Yes.
It
did, yes.
I suppose, I don't know if you can call it a compromise, but they ceded some territory to Russia. Okay. Although Finland was, I think, also under Russia's thumb in many ways, even though it was during the Cold War. But anyway, I'll let you comment on that.
I don't know. I mean, it wasn't just a little bit of Finland that was taken by Russia after the Winter War.
Yeah.
It was a very large chunk of Finland.
Oh, right.
Of the south, especially Karelia.
Yes.
Which was taken, including one of the largest cities of one of the most international cities was Viipuri, which was taken by Russia. But just I'm no expert really on these, and it's extraordinarily complicated because there wasn't just one war, but there was two wars. There was a war, the Winter War, which ended with Russia taking a large chunk of Finland, and then there was the Continuation War, at which time Finland was allied with Germany, and that ended, of course, the way it ended, and Finland, very fortunately or very adroitly, wasn't occupied by any country after in 1945. And thereafter, you could say, I don't know if under the thumb is the right word, because it was what's often referred to rather contemptuously as Finlandization.
Yes.
In fact, Finland had a pretty high degree of independence. So even at that time, although the politicians...
So do you think it was Cold War propaganda?
I wouldn't say, well, I think there
Yeah.
has been an element of propaganda about that since.
Yes.
It's a lot more complicated than people say. And one doesn't realize how much Finland gained from that period of the Cold War through
Yes.
trade with Russia. They had a very economically successful in many ways through the goods that were supplied as, quote, war reparations to Russia, but developed the industry of Finland in a way, developed quite a bit of the country's prosperity during the second half of the 20th century.
All right.
But yeah, I mean, of course, the memories are there very much so.
Yeah, sure.
Of the Winter War and of the.
Do you know what the percentage of territory was that was taken over?
I should have researched that, but I think it would be something in the region of 20%, but
20%, right?
Say.
Yeah.
It was a big chunk of the most productive and most developed part of the country.
Yeah.
Not to say something up in the north as well. There was mines, the
Yes.
nickel mines, cobalt mines up in the north of the country, and access to the Arctic Ocean as well was lost. So these are things, there's a whole history there.
But interestingly, some historians think that Hitler was fooled into invading Russia because he thought, well, even the Finns can defeat them, surely we can. But I don't know how correct the historians
I
are.
think you'd have to ask. That's the impression I've gained anyway.
Yes, yes.
That was one reason why Hitler thought it would be an easy task to march into Russia.
Yeah.
The performance of the Russians had not been great in the Winter War.
Yeah. So, okay, so my next question, how is the Russian war against Ukraine affecting the general public in Finland, as far as you know? Yeah.
I think it has totally swung opinion into joining NATO, and that's a pretty radical step. Because up until then, up until the invasion of Ukraine, the majority of people in Finland were against joining NATO because it was thought that neutrality had been a benefit. And friendly relations with Russia had been, which they definitely were. There's plenty of economic links with Russia. That has come to a dead end, pretty much. So yes.
But is there any opposition to such a move?
Yes, there is, and I can't tell you the percentages, but I think there's something like still about a third, 25 or 30% of people who would be opposed to joining NATO. Right. And I know people myself who are. In the British community, for example, in Finland. Yes.
Okay.
I think a lot of us here might be.
Excuse me?
I think a lot of us here might be against.
They do. Yes.
Joining NATO.
Yes.
Any expansion of NATO.
Yeah.
Well, I think we should open the discussion to everyone now. Anybody have any questions or observations? Unless you want to have any final words, Donald.
No, I'll leave it because I'm due to read a bit later on. And
you are, yes.
One of the poems actually concerns the emotion and what's the feelings of people. So leave it there just now.
Could I ask a question, Donald?
Yes.
This business of Finland trying to join NATO, if I was living there, I think I would be very anxious about it because Finland has a long border with Russia, and they're the final outpost of
very true. And I'll say I'm going to read something on that. Of course, yes. When you have 1,000 miles of border with another country, which has just shown itself that can launch an army of 120, 200,000 people against another country, well, you're certainly going to make you. Well, I'll read that later. I'll talk about say something else actually later from that, perhaps. Yeah.
Anybody else or? Oh, well, in that case, they'll go on to Bashabi, who's not here. so I mean, she's left us with 2 poems. So I don't know. Maybe Jean and I should read each poem. What do you think, Jean? Yeah.
Yes.
But does she need an introduction, do you think? Or
Oh, yes, definitely.
okay, I'll give.
Very eminent woman, Bashabi.
Well, she is indeed. Yeah, okay. So Dr. Bashabi Fraser, CBE, is an award-winning poet, children's writer, editor, translator, and academic. Bashabi's work traverses continents in bridge-building literary projects. She has authored and edited 23 books, published several articles and chapters, both academic and creative, and as a poet, has been widely anthologized. She's the recipient of a CBE 2021 Queen's New Year's Honors List, and has been and she was declared Outstanding Woman of Scotland by the Saltire Society in 2015. So I just want to add that she's on the board of Scottish Pen, and she also happens to be a member of Writers for Peace, even though she's not here at the moment, but never mind. So anyway, her most recent book is Patient Dignity, a transnational collection of poems and paintings by the artist Wiba Pankaj that compares Scotland to India. So let's go on to her poems then. Yeah, Sunflower. So I'll read the Sunflowers and you can read the Pushchairs.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, okay.
Yes.
I'll read the Sunflower ones. Sunflower seeds, an offering. As the gloom gathers around her, she sees him standing, gun in hand, in her precious hand. This man sent by a destroyer to claim her street and force her retreat to her cellar and cower. She is frail but bold. She walks to him and holds out a handful of seeds, telling him to heed her words and treasure them in his pocket as a safety measure. So when all the rockets sent by his destroyer bolster the determination of the defenders of her nation, he will fall and not return. But the seeds will see the sun, the flowers that will spring in a new beginning that will heal his dark deeds and see her land relieved. Okay, well, I should just add, I'm sure that something must have happened beyond her control. Bashabi, she's usually very reliable. But anyway, now for Jean.
Well, this poem is called Pushchairs in Lviv City Square. They are parked with intention, not abandoned with despair, but left as a testimony to the calculated fear sent to destroy their morale and willpower. These pushchairs, now emptied of innocence and promise, little lives without enmity, without rancor or blemish, bombed and splintered with demonic relish. They stand as witnesses to the force of evil, unleashed by one man's capacity to revel in the flattening of hope and all that is civil. Little feet will not scamper. Oh dear, sorry, it's very touching. Little feet will not scamper with adventurous relish. Little hands will not reach for the beauty and promise this earth had preserved for their nurture in a future that can no longer be conserved. They won't see the candles multiply on a cake. They won't feel the free wind as they swing in the park. They will never know the joy of new words, of dancing and painting, of the music of birds. But they will live as little flames in the hearts that gave them names. And these pushchairs will now bear the story of each life that was true and rare. Thank you.
Mm.
So
they have a real emotional punch, both poems,
yeah.
I think. Mm.
Mario, you're going to introduce Donald properly now?
Yes. Yeah, I'll do that, yes. No, I thought those poems deserved a bit of silence and then. So anyway, this is now the full introduction to Donald. Donald Adamson is a poet and translator currently living in Finland and Scotland. In 1995, he was awarded a Scottish Arts Council Writers' Bursary. He has lived in France, the Middle East, and Finland, and has translated Finnish poems for How to Address the Fog. The book is called How to Address the Fog, Finnish Poems, 1978-2002, published by Carcanet in the Scottish Poetry Library. Also song texts for the Sibelius Academy, Helsinki, and for the World Music Group Vartina. He compiled a Landscape Blossoms Within Me translation of the Finnish poet Eva Kilpi, ARC Publications, and his collection All Coming Back was recently published by Roncadora Publications. Donald co-founded the Scottish Arts and Literature magazine Markings, and has been a prize winner in several poetry competitions. His poem False Prophets, which in 1999 won the Herald Millennium Poetry Competition, is buried in a time capsule under the walls of the Scottish Poetry Library. Of course, many of his poems are in Scots. Now, he also contributed to the Scottish Pen publication Declarations on the Declaration of Arbroath. Okay, Donald, could you have your poems now?
Okay, thank you. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, I can anyway.
Okay. Well, just taking up the invasion of Ukraine and what happened then, and the change of mood, and it got me to think that there have been rights and wrongs, no doubt, leading up to this, and in the negotiation and in the events in 2014 and thereafter. But in a way, it becomes kind of irrelevant, or feels irrelevant, when you're in a country that's directly threatened by 200,000 soldiers. I mean that Vladimir Putin has said, I think, that he wants to reclaim the former Soviet empire, which would include the Baltic countries of Estonia, Latvia, and Lithuania. And not only that, he has seemed to imply that he would repudiate the agreement made by Lenin with Finland, allowing Finland's Finland's independence in 1917. Which goes rather further than not just the former Soviet empire, but the entire Tsarist empire. And I'm feeling it's pretty clear that if he had the chance, and if he wasn't dissuaded, he would go right ahead and do it. So when you're in a country that is being directly threatened with destruction, your perspective becomes clearer. And you can say, should join it or shouldn't have joined, etc., etc. And now we're between two dictators, Putin and Erdogan. But we are where we are. And the situation encompasses being afraid. And I think if you don't admit you're afraid, I think you're either superhuman or super macho or faking it. And so this poem is called In Time of War, from a country on Putin's hit list. As the war draws closer, with pictures of a little girl killed, a mother wailing, a mud-stained rescuer digging through rubble, I chide myself that I don't yet weep within, that my outrage is helpless, numbed, not a dam bursting behind the skull. Others, I have the impression, on seeing these images, feel and act more nobly, with true empathy, cursing aloud, tearful. I ponder the reasons, that the war's still distant enough to hope that it will slow, judder, and stop before the tanks come or the bombs, that hope makes the recorded grief of others more bearable than my own half-anticipated griefs. I mean that unfeelingness is my soul's armor donned out of fear. Yes, I am afraid. Others, I suspect, fear less, feel more, and weep. Okay, just about the most powerful anti-war poem I know is in French. It's based on the French song Giroflée, Girofla, a children's song. Now, the text of the poem was written in 1935 by the German Jewish poet Rosa Holt, who became a refugee in France after Hitler's rise to power. Now, the basic idea is that no matter how happy you are with your house and your garden and your family, the soldiers will come and shoot and rape and kill. And by the way, the French version was sung by Yves Montand, and it has singing, it covers a big range of notes, an octave and a half. Now I'm going to try and sing it, but I'm struggling, I'm quavering, I'm afraid. So I beg your indulgence, really. It starts high, starts low, and it goes high, is the thing here. Jeva hus is snug and canty, roses red, roses braw, Eva garden scents and blossom as the late birds caw, but the moon's eye grow and reader, roses red, roses braw, bonzo blast it, bonzo blast it, Ye hae bonny fields o' barley, roses red, roses braw, and the corn is full of promise, for the harvest is it no? But the forges glow in the reader, roses red, roses braw, guns will gather it all, guns will gather it all. Ye've a hoose with bonny lasses, some are teens, some are small, in our sparkling faces joyful, love is shared to fall, but the sodgers in the valley, roses red, roses braw, gan to rape them all, gan to rape them all. Ye hae sons sae strong and tender, roses red, roses braw, see them singing, juking, playing with a bat and ball, but they'll soon be taken frae ye, roses red, roses braw, and be food for the craw, and be food for the craw. For as long as there are sodgers, yours, your son, mine, and all, there'll be naething good in earth, or wealth, or worth, or law. They will shoot you down and leave you in the glare and the snow. Nathan gained of all, Nathan gained of all. Okay, pretty stark stuff, and I recommend you to listen to Yves Montand on YouTube. Type in Giroflée, Girofla, Yves Montand, and you'll get the song there. I finished by this poem called The Window. I'm delighted to have this poem in Jerry Lucy's new anthology called The Earth is Our Home. It turned into a kind of ode to Trifle, which rises steeply from the Solway coast. And I looked onto it from my home outside Dumfries, and I somehow think of it as my hill. I wanted to end in a kind of almost hopeful, at least hopeful note. When I think of home, I do not think of walls, rooms, or a roof, but a window and the hill I saw from it all through my childhood. Spring mist bonnet, blue heat haze in summer, autumn cloud cap, wintry tip of frost. Not mine, but Ornalise, whose rent is paid in every breath I take. And if I'm allowed, in ashes cast someday on the hill's flank. I don't possess it, can't bequeath it, yet I wish the same for all who wander earth from want or war or new-made boundaries, that they may keep a loveliness within, a window to look out from, a simple square framing, hugging, an abiding memory, and sense of their belonging, mirror clear, whatever the train of years or hope, if hope there is of a return. This is the place that made me what I am. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Our next reader is a poet I met at the Beyond Borders Festival, actually. I didn't know her at all. I was a judge and she won the competition that year. There were 3 sections and we're going to hear another award-winning poet later as well. She's originally from Northern Ireland and now lives in Ayrshire. She focuses on philosophical, political and life experience themes, and she's been widely published in the UK, in Ireland, in the US, and in our Dovetails anthology, I believe. In 2019, she won the Waterways Storymaking Festival and Imprint Writing Awards, and was longlisted for the Over the Edge New Writer of the Year. And in 2020, she was mentioned with honours in the Cinnamon Pencil Award. Caroline Johnson.
Hi there, thank you for having me tonight. So I've got 3 poems to read, and the first one's called Shining Armour, and there's an epigraph with it, which I'll just read, which comes from Homer's Iliad. So he, Ares, spoke and ordered Deimos, terror, and Phobos, fear, to harness his horse, and himself got into shining armour. Shining armour. Comrade Putin is a man of suits and discipline who thinks for Russia on his daily swim, thinks of absolute power, thinks he's a knight in shining armour, thinks about his expansionist heroes, Ivan the Terrible, Catherine the Great, thinks like a stalker wanting to embrace what once was his, thinks how to harness the twin gods of terror and fear, thinks that children are collateral damage, thinks what to keep up his sleeve to whip the world into submission, thinks people won't step out of line until they do. Well, let's hope that happens more and more. And then the second one's called The War Machine. The war machine awakes. It stirs itself to life, gets ready, then gets fueled by fear's usual worn out reasons, revenge, religion, a way of life protected, an avid greed for land, resources, people, power. No need to open eyes that close with hate. It stretches from its hibernation to lumber forward, forked tongue-licking lips that bleed mass graves of sightless, limbless, genocidal pawns. Death and destruction ride shotgun, as each tooth, a craftsman engineered to slit and split, rips up world borders into problematic shapes, forever alters humans, hearts and homes. The monster, bloated, rumbles on to final conquests, then belching, halts at trading points of fortunes kept or made, or white flags flying at half-mast and risky bets and peace agreements. With conscience clear, again it sleeps, with one eye open. Then the final one's called the Number Crunchers. Game on. Their sleeves rolled up around the clock, they munch the figures that harmless, guiltless in themselves prove nothing. Behind closed doors, big data is digested, tested and dissected. Big Brother hiding secrets from the common men who sleep. Number crunchers spin them deftly into patchwork quilts of silken lies, threads that twist fake news, converting it to truth by 2 strokes of the pen or the push of a button. They do the math and light the touch paper. Thank you.
Okay, I'll Liz now. Liz is chair of the Writers in Exile and editor of Pennings magazine. Her poetry collections include Stravagan, Burning Winds, The Shardbox, and Shardbox from Lewitt Press. Public and art collaboration includes text in stones and wood. In stone and wood. The author of Scott's dossier for European Bureau of Minority Languages. She has edited a wide range of literature, including New Writing Scotland, ASLS, and various education, that's the publisher, and various education resources of poetry and Scots language. Awards include Macash Poetry Prize, Saltar Tess. She's an honorary fellow of the Association of Scottish Literary Studies and convener of Scottish Pen's Writers in Exile Committee. She's going to read her poems from the forthcoming edition of Pennings magazine. Oh.
I think you have to unmute, Liz.
Is Liz there somewhere?
I think that's it.
Oh, there you are. There you are. Yes.
It was ignoring my clicking completely. Thanks very much, Mario, and thanks for inviting me to come along tonight. I'm going to read a couple of pieces. Twice a year when we edit Pennings, we always invite a guest editor. Ruth Aylett is the current guest editor of the magazine, which is about to come out and be published very soon. And we always have an international featured writer. And so we decided that for this one, it would be really good to have a Ukraine writer. So as you can imagine, it was quite complicated getting a hold of somebody in the midst of what's happening. For the international writer, we usually require a biography, an example of their work, and a photograph. And Lyuba Yakimchuk was incredibly helpful and gave us all of these when we asked for them. She had actually read at Stanza, in fact, this year. So we've sort of followed a trail of paperwork and contacts and managed to get a hold of Lyuba, and it's been really great to have her. So that's the main one that I'm going to talk about first of all. And just to say also that twice a year when Pennings comes out, we have a theme. We always have a theme, and the theme for this one, which is always chosen by the guest editor. So the last guest editor chose gifting. Norwal was his own language for the word gifting, and so the theme, loosely, the theme has been gifting for this one. The next theme and deadline will come out quite soon. It'll probably be much later on in the year because it's just coming out in the current one at the moment. So Lyuba Yakimchuk is a poet, screenwriter, and playwright. She was born in 1985 in Ukraine, and she lived in Kiev. But because of the Russian massive invasion, had to evacuate with her son to Vienna. She is the author of several full-length poetry collections, including Apricots of Donbass, which was listed in the top 10 books about the war by Forbes magazine's rating in Ukraine. In 2015, Kiev's New Time magazine listed Yakimchuk among the 100 most influential people in the arts in Ukraine. Her new play Wall was produced at the Ivan Franko National Academic Drama Theatre, the largest and oldest Ukrainian theatre. Her poems have been translated into 20 languages. She has received a number of awards, including 3 of Ukraine's most prestigious awards for young poets. In 2022, she performed her poem Prayer in a project called Free by John Legend during the Grammy Awards. So Lyuba's title is I Have a Crisis for You. I have a crisis for you. You lit up a cigarette, but it wouldn't burn. It was summer, and girls would light up from any passerby. But I didn't light up from you anymore. Our love's gone missing. I explained to a friend it vanished in one of the wars we waged in our kitchen. Change the word war to crisis, he suggests, because a crisis is something everyone has from time to time. Remember the Second World Crisis. Correspondingly, also the First World Civil Crisis, to each his own. I forgot about the Cold Crisis. It seems they also came in twos. Also the Uprising Crisis. It sounds so good. The Uprising Crisis of 1648 to 1657. Write it down in the notebooks. A crisis that liberates, releases forever. My great-grandfather fell in the Second World Crisis, possibly by the hand of my other great-grandfather, or his machine gun, or his battle tank. But it is unclear how they conducted this crisis with each other. Perhaps it was the crisis itself that killed them, like a plague, for nobody is to blame for the crisis. It is inexorable like death. And how our own domestic war turns into crisis, does it get better? Does it hurt less? Do birds come back to us from the south? Or maybe we come out to meet them? Why is our language like that? We lack words to describe our feelings. Only crisis and love are left as antonyms. But if love is bound to be so complicated with these blazes and smoulderings like blood and pain, and blood is not like periods, but some new feeling of mine, and pain is yours. If love is made up of two different feelings, then soon love will also be called crisis. I have a crisis for you, darling. Let's get married. It'll be easier for us both. We've got a crisis. We'd better split up. And that's translated from the Ukrainian by Svetlana Lavokina, published in the poetry collection Apricots of Donbass in 2021 in the USA. Just to mention on a happier note, just before going to the next poem, in Dumfries and Galloway, we have welcomed a lot of Ukrainian families just now. It's actually really lovely. There's quite a lot being done to help with accommodation and with access to lots of facilities around Dumfries and Galloway, with free bus passes and free access to various children's places of fun and entertainment. I have a bundle coming here in the morning, in fact, for coffee, cakes. And so just to say there's a really nice situation, as much as we can provide for some of the people who've come over from Ukraine. They're getting their biometric tests and hoping to get some work. It's very hard for them. They don't know how long they'll be here, or just the situation is always in their mind of what's going on back home. They're not tourists. You have to keep reminding ourselves when we try to provide nice things to do. They're not tourists, you know, they have this going on in their mind all the time, but we try to do what we can. So this poem I'm going to read is by Gerda Stevenson, and it's coming out in the magazine that's about to be launched. Gerda can't make it tonight. Gerda's an award-winning writer, actor, director, singer-songwriter. Her poetry, drama and prose are widely published, staged and broadcast. Her play Federer versus Murray toured to New York, nominated as MG Alba Scots Singer of the Year for her album Night Touches Day. Her poetry, If This Were Real and Quines, both also published in Rome by Edizioni Ensemble in Italian translations. And Inside and Out, The Art of Christian Small, with the landscape photographer Alan Wright. She has a collection of short stories also called Letting Go. And she sent in her submission for Pennings. All the submissions that are entered for Pennings are anonymous. The editorial group, which is Moira McPartlin, myself, and Samina Chaudhry, the entries are always anonymous, and the names are removed from the entries before they come in. So it's actually really interesting afterwards to see, oh, that's who it's by. So this is one that we really loved, called Russian Glove. I happened to be wearing them that Sunday morning. News of Ukraine bleeding from the radio as I left the house to join neighbours at our local attraction, the Red Coffee Van. A new heartbeat drawing us together. A constant trickle for an hour or so along the village arteries. Life after the virus opening up. The aroma of freshly ground beans teasing our nostrils in the frosted air. And there, in the car park, our ankles fringed by snowdrops, white lanterns expanding in the sun. My gloves are admired for their intricate pattern, fairy style with a touch, eggshell blue, yellow and green. Spring colours to lift our spirits, someone says. And I remind her of the Russian women who lived for a while over the hill, became my friend, and made them for me, deft fingers flicking wool between needles click. Those supple, expert hands I know so well, and often think of in everything they do. Then a man says it, casts a tiny grenade into the morning. So they'll be for the bin, won't they? And a small cloud of hatred hangs in the sour air.
It's brilliant. Bashabi Bashabi has arrived. She's obviously thought that it was a 7:30 start. We've been going for an hour, Bashabi, and we read your poems.
I'm really sorry. I don't know why that happened, but
well,
yeah.
Would you like to say something about India and the situation with Ukraine? Because I think that we have, you know, we have a very Western-centric media, don't we? And you know, Asia has a big part to play, I imagine.
Well, it's India has a long-standing relationship with Russia historically, because soon after Indian independence, India faced, especially under Indira Gandhi, the fear of famine. And Indira did something that nobody else had been able to do. She went to Russia and she went to America. And she was, I think, a very charming woman, and the two men at that time in the two countries found her irresistible. Anyway, she got help from both countries by way of grain, a promise of grain, wheat. So, and in her father's time, Nehru, who was the first Prime Minister of India, he got a lot of help from Russia with heavy industries, which was we now know it was a bad investment. So from then on, India has had a very positive relationship with Russia. We grew up reading Russian novels and poetry in translation, which were affordable because we couldn't afford to buy books from the West because they were prohibitive, their prices. So when Ukraine happened, this long-standing relationship, one hoped, would stand the world in good stead. India has a vast number of people who can't afford the current prices of fuel. And that is where Russia comes in. And India is still buying oil from Russia. And India is afraid to point out what Russia is doing in Ukraine is wrong, I think. That's my personal opinion. But the opinion of many of my friends, India is also worried about China. And China as India sees it, is a friend of Russia. And India doesn't want to rock the boat because we already have China occupying quite a bit of India. And India hasn't actually been able to fight back. So these three big powers are in a kind of triangular, very difficult relationship. And I hope that India will exert her power as the world's largest democracy to influence Russia to some sort of understanding that will put an end to this devastating conflict, and may then be a go-between between the East and the West, between China and the West as well. So that's where I would leave it. But it's a hope. It's what many journalists and political analysts are saying, and we can only live in hope, I think.
Yeah, I think it bears out what Alexis's thesis of toxic neutrality. Actually, when you do nothing, then you endorse the person, and there is no impunity. Well, I'm going to
just want to say thank you, Bashabi. I think the Indian perspective was very important, so I'm glad you talked about it.
Yeah.
And my apologies again, Jean. This was totally unintended.
I phoned you, but there didn't seem to be anybody.
Well, my phone has been on silent because I was at a meeting earlier, but I came back ages ago and I hadn't realized it was on silent. So I was actually at home.
Never mind.
Next time.
Yes.
I'm going to read a poem of my own now. I suppose this question of impunity is eating away at us all. A member of Dovetail said to me, that Ukraine really taxes her, and she has to look back at all the peace campaigners of the past just to remind herself that peace is the important thing here. And we seem to have lost sight of it. At the beginning of this war, there was some kind of mention of peace talks, but it's gradually receded. And I suppose I agree with Alexis. This should not be, people shouldn't be allowed to get away with it. But for me, the question is, how will that happen? I don't have any great hopes it will. So this poem is called International Justice. An English castle, 1390. The lord of the manor decides. Deep in his dungeon, heavy iron racks, where traitors are twisted and tortured or skewered like pigs. They laugh when they hear them scream. Nuremberg, 1946. International justice decides. Due process was given to those who thought themselves above the law. The judgment, severe and final. They sighed with relief when it was all over. Romania, Christmas Day, 1989. The army decides. The dictator and his wife try to flee, but the helicopter is brought down. A drumhead trial at high speed. The order to hang them, handwritten in the lavatory. They shook hands at a job well done. Iran, 2006. Blair and Bush decide. 250,000 dead. But all they care about are oil and weapons that never existed. The dictator cowers in a hole in the dirt, is brought out in his underpants. They jeered at his hanging, filmed it on a mobile phone. Pakistan, 2011. Barack Obama and Hillary Clinton decide. They named their mission after a Hollywood film. send in the SEALs in a cover op to kill the man who blazoned his hate over the New York skyline, the ultimate theatre of war. They cheered in the White House as they watched his death on screen. Ukraine 2020, who decides? Russia creates a desert of the world's breadbasket, a ghost country where millions have fled their homes. The world's future hangs in the balance. The attacker should be brought to trial, but they'll never dare. Will we just follow the money? Okay. Our penultimate poet is A.C. Clarke, who is published 5 collections and 6 pamphlets. 2 of the pamphlets are set in Drogheda, were in collaboration with Maggie Rabatsky and Sheila Templeton, and used all the languages of Scotland, English, Scots and Gaelic. Actually, Sheila Templeton's really the Doric, isn't she? So it's a 4th, I think. Her 5th full collection, A Troubling Woman, came out in 2017. And she was one of 4 winners in the Cinnamon Press pamphlet competition that year with War Baby. She's been working on an extensive series of poems about Paul and Gala Éluard, later Gala Dali, and the surrealist circles in which they moved. It's a bit of a departure for her, and I love these poems, they're great. The first was published as a pamphlet by Tap Saltieri last year. This year, she's been involved with other writers and artists in a project inspired by Gart Naval Royal Hospital and initiated by Gillian McDougall. And A.C. Clarke, and I'm going to ask her to let us see her. Yes, thank you.
Thank you, Jean. Jean gave us a very wide sweeping historical perspective. I suppose, in a sense, my poem does. It's a very basic poem, which I wrote in a hurry for this event, I have to say. And its title is Send Warm Socks, which I'm sure everyone knows, the well-known letter from a Roman soldier on Hadrian's Wall writing home. And he needed the warm socks up on Hadrian's Wall. And an alternative title, which really tells you what the poem is about, is Same Old, Same Old. Send warm socks, writes the centurion, shivering in a God-forsaken outpost of empire. Send more swords and better, think the clansman, turfed off his land by strangers who don't speak his language. Make it stop, cry those caught in the crossfire, who never started what may end them. Being born where they were born, no say in the matter. Send good boots, writes the soldier, trampling a quagmire of tank tracks. Send more guns and better, thinks the citizen, turfed off his land by strangers who won't speak his language. And those caught in the crossfire, who never started what may end them, being born where they were born, cry, make it stop. Thank you.
Okay, we've come to our final poet here, Tom Hubbard. Tom Hubbard was the first librarian of the Scottish Poetry Library and is the author of 10 books of fiction, poetry and non-fiction, and editor or co-editor of many others. His most recent book is The Devil and Michael Scott, published by Grace Note. The Emerald Passport, his lecture on the Rzeczenie Academy of Arts and Letters, has just been published. It's a Hungarian. This annual lecture is presented by the Academy, most recently on Zoom, and is sponsored by the Irish Embassy in Budapest. He's also recently contributed to an anthology of essays on Hamish Henderson, which is called Hamish Henderson Conversation Piece, which is edited by Charles Naismith, the artist Charles Naismith. So now a selection of his essays and talks, Invitation to the Voyage, Scotland Literature in Europe, is forthcoming from Reimer Books. So over to you, Tom.
Can you hear me? I'm not sure if I'm mute or not.
We can hear you. We
Yep.
can.
We can hear you, yeah.
You're right. Okay, this is called Ranting Righties Rap, and I'll be using a variety of voices. God save America, America, save God, 45th Pres. Let us now loudly holler, land of the gun and dollar, private wealth, public squalor. Our Bible says we're going to get away with it. Ladies and gentlemen, let us bomb Yemen. We'll fake pious pain over Ukraine, send dark skins to Rwanda. Our tired propaganda wins over the gullible, whose IQ's terrible. I think we'll get away with it. Promises on the side of a bus, Putin Patel, Trumpy Truss. We'll wink at the bobby, get on with the jobby. Draw a line and move on. We're unmoved, won't be drawn. Lefty lawyers and bishops hate freedom for pish-ups. Pibber pig, hiccups. They'll forget all that shit. We'll get away with it. We'll vow to deliver level up or whatever. First Lord of the cesspit, crony contracts, Brexit. We'll crush those woke rowdies, suck up to the Saudis. Let the oiks starve and freeze. We'll announce a new wheeze. We'll grope, puke, and plunder. Let the dying earth wonder how we got away with it.
Thank you. Brilliant.
Yeah.
Great ending.
Yes. Well, thank you, everyone. And Jean, if you're...
Yeah, thank you all very much. It's been, and particularly thank you to Mario for setting this whole thing up, and it's been great to have a joint event with PEN, and thank you to Scottish PEN for hosting it. That took the responsibility away from me. Thank you. And thank you, of course, to all the people who spoke, to Alexis, who came from Geneva, to Donald, who's staying up late now in Finland, and to all the poets who read. Thank you very much. And to Bashabi, because you moved us to tears with your poetry.
Yes. Yeah.
Thank you, and my apologies again, Jean, and thank you for including me. Yeah.
Thank you all very much. Night.
Thank you, Jean.
Bye now. Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thanks to everyone. Good night.
Thank you.
Good night.
Good night. Good night.